They threw him out into the snow. 6 months after his wife died, her parents made their choice. Declan Wade stood in the circular driveway of the Ashford estate, watching his life get tossed into garbage bags. Black plastic splitting at the seams. His clothes. His books. The framed photo of Isabella on their wedding day glass cracked when it hit the frozen ground. He didn't move. Couldn't. The cold bit through his field jacket, but he barely felt it. The real cold was inside had been since the night the state trooper knocked on his door. Behind him, the mansion rose like a monument to old money and older grudges. Every window blazed with light, but none of that warmth reached him now. Victoria Ashford stood on the top step, fur coat wrapped, tight arms crossed, her face carved into an expression that held no grief, no mercy. Just the bitter satisfaction of finally cutting loose the man she'd never wanted for her daughter. "We're done here," Victoria said, her voice carried over the wind sharp as broken glass. "Isabella is gone. And you—" She pointed at him like he was something unclean. "You were always temporary." Declan's jaw tightened. He didn't trust his voice. Beside him, Valko pressed against his leg, the German shepherd's muscles coiled tight beneath his dark coat. Every time a door slammed or a voice rose, the dog shifted protectively, reading danger in every sound. Combat trained. 6 years overseas together. Valko knew when the world was turning hostile. Declan lifted a trembling hand and touched the dog's head, grounding himself the way Valko had done for him through firefights and sleepless nights, in places that had no names on any map. Victoria descended 3 steps, heels clicking against stone. "My daughter made a mistake marrying you. We all knew it. A soldier with no family, no prospects, no class." She paused, letting each word land. Isabella deserved better. The words hit like body blows. For 6 months after Isabella's death, Declan had clung to the Ashfords because they were all he had left of her. Now he saw the truth. They tolerated him while she lived. Barely. Now that she was gone, he was just another problem to dispose of. The butler, Mr. Thornton, a thin man in his 70s, avoided Declan's eyes as he set the final box near the gate. His hand shook slightly. Not from cold. "Lock it," Victoria snapped. The iron gates began to swing shut with a deep groan metal scraping against metal. Valko barked once sharp and urgent. The dog's instinct sensed threat in the finality of that closing gate. Declan knelt beside him, one hand gripping the thick fur at Valko's shoulders. "Easy," Declan whispered. His voice came out rough, barely audible over the wind. "It's okay." Nothing about this was okay. Victoria's voice cut through the storm one final time. "Take your dog and go. You're trespassing now." Declan swallowed against the taste of copper in his mouth. He had nowhere to go. No apartment, no savings after medical bills and funeral costs. His discharge from the Navy had come too fast to prepare. And Isabella's death had carved him hollow in ways he still couldn't understand or explain. He bent to gather the garbage bags. His fingers stiffened in the cold. Pain flared in his right shoulder, the old injury from an incident he couldn't talk about in a place he couldn't name. Valko picked up a smaller bag in his teeth, staying close tail low but steady. Declan turned toward his F-150 parked outside the gate. The truck was 15 years old, more rust than paint engine that coughed like a dying man. But it ran. Barely. He hesitated at the truck door hand reaching into his jacket pocket. His fingers found the envelope there, the one Mr. Thornton had pressed into his hand 2 hours ago when Victoria wasn't looking. The old butler's eyes had been wet. "She wanted you to have this," Thornton had whispered. "Miss Isabella, she left it with me before the accident." Declan hadn't opened it yet, couldn't bear to. Not with Victoria watching. Not with the gates closing behind him like the door to a tomb. Behind him, Victoria called out one final time. Her voice held triumph rather than grief. "You never belonged here, Mr. Wade." Isabella saw that eventually. She told me so. 2 days before she died. The lie landed perfectly. Declan knew it was a lie, had to be. But doubt crept in anyway, cold and poisonous. He didn't look back. Couldn't give Victoria the satisfaction. He opened the truck door. Valko jumped in, first shaking snow from his coat, settling into the passenger seat with the practiced ease of a partner who'd ridden through worse than this. Declan followed, setting the garbage bags in the back seat. The truck's engine sputtered, threatening to die before it caught. The heater blew nothing but frozen air. Declan rested his forehead on the steering wheel. His breath came in shaky pulls, fogging the windshield. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, heavy enough to crush. Valko nudged his arm, offering comfort the way only he could. No words, no judgment, just presence. "Yeah," Declan whispered hoarsely. "I know, we'll figure it out." He looked once more at the mansion where he'd loved Isabella. where they'd celebrated 2 Christmases quiet mornings with coffee plans for a future that died with her on Interstate 84 when her brakes failed on a wet October night. Victoria stood in the doorway, backlit and triumphant. The gates clanged shut behind him with a sound like a prison door. Loud, final, merciless. Declan shifted the truck into gear and drove into the storm. By the time the Ashford estate disappeared in his rearview mirror, he wasn't Isabella's husband anymore. He wasn't a son-in-law. He was just a man with a dog, a broken truck, and an envelope he was afraid to open. The envelope. 20 miles down the highway, Declan pulled into a rest stop. The parking lot was empty except for a semi-truck idling in the corner, exhaust rising like ghosts into the gray sky. He cut the engine. The cab immediately began losing what little heat it had generated. Valco watched him with those dark, intelligent eyes, waiting. Declan pulled out the envelope, his name written across it in Isabella's handwriting. Elegant loops and curves, the way she signed birthday cards and grocery lists. The sight of it made his chest ache. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside, 2 things, a letter folded once, and a small brass key, old and worn. He unfolded the letter. Isabella's voice seemed to rise from the page. Declan, if you're reading this, something happened to me. And if something happened, I know my mother will turn on you. She's been waiting for an excuse since the day we got married. Don't fight her. You can't win. She has lawyers and money and a heart that calculates cost before it feels anything. Instead, go to Wyoming. There's land there, 40 acres called the Blackwood Tract. My grandfather bought it in 1952, left it to me in his will. My mother doesn't know about it. She never bothered to read Grandpa's estate papers, just assumed everything valuable came to her. The land is yours now. I put your name on the deed 2 months ago. I had a feeling I might need to. It's remote, quiet, the kind of place where a man and his dog can disappear if they need to. The key opens a safety deposit box at First National in Pine Ridge, Wyoming. Box 447. There's $47,000 inside, the last of Grandpa's savings. It's not much, but it's enough to start over. I love you, Declan. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about any of this while I could. I was waiting for the right time and time ran out. Go to Wyoming. Build something there. Something my mother can't touch. Yours always, Isabel. Declan read it 3 times, then a 4th. His vision blurred on the 5th read. Tears came silently tracking down his face and disappearing into his beard. Valco leaned across the center console, pressing his head against Declan's shoulder. The dog's warmth solid and real and steady. She knew, Declan whispered. She knew they'd do this. He looked at the key, small and brass and ordinary, the kind that opened 1,000 different boxes. But this one held $40,000 in a future he hadn't known existed 6 hours ago. Wyoming, land, a place to disappear. He'd never been to Wyoming. Didn't know anything about it except mountains and cold and empty space. That sounded about right. Empty space was what he needed. Room to breathe without the weight of Victoria's judgment, without the ghost of Isabella haunting every corner of Connecticut. Declan started the engine. It caught on the 3rd try. He pulled back onto the highway, heading west this time. Away from Connecticut, away from the Ashfords, towards something Isabella had prepared for him in secret, like she'd known her own death was coming and had tried to build him a landing place for the fall. The drive took 3 days. Declan pushed the old truck as hard as he dared, stopping only for gas and bad coffee and a few hours of sleep in rest stop parking lots. Valco rode in silence, watching the landscape change from gray eastern forests to flat Midwest plains to the jagged rise of the Rockies. They crossed into Wyoming on a bright July morning. The sky so blue it hurt to look at, mountains like teeth biting at the horizon. Declan found Pine Ridge just after noon on the 3rd day. Population 340, according to the faded sign at the town limit. 1 main street, gas station with a diner attached. Post office, library, feed store. Everything else was just houses spread out across the valley, connected by dirt roads and barbed wire fences. The First National Bank sat on the corner of Main and Oak, a brick building that looked like it hadn't changed since 1952. Declan parked the truck and sat for a moment staring at the entrance. This is it, he said quietly. Valco's ear twitched. Inside the bank was cool and dim. An older woman at the front desk looked up as he entered. Her smile was professional but warm. Help you, safety deposit box, Declan said. Number 447. Her smile shifted slightly. Recognition, maybe, or surprise. You must be Mr. Wade, he blinked. How'd you? Mrs. Wade added your name to the box 2 months ago. Said you'd be coming in eventually. The woman stood, keys jangling at her belt. I'm Sarah Pritchard. I was sorry to hear about Isabella. She was a sweet girl, used to visit her grandfather here every summer. Declan's throat tightened. You knew her. Everyone knew everyone back then. Town was even smaller. Sarah led him to a small room lined with metal boxes. She unlocked 447, slid it out, and left him alone. Inside the box, exactly as Isabella had promised. $47,000 in $100 bills bound in neat stacks. And another envelope, smaller this time. He opened it. Declan, if you made it this far, you're stronger than you think. The land is 15 miles north of town. Blackwood Tract. The realtor's office is on Main Street. Woman named June Cartwright. She has the deed. Build something good there. Something that lasts. I love you. The realtor's office was 2 doors down from the bank. June Cartwright was a woman in her 60s, thin as a rail with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. She had the deed ready. Isabella's name crossed out, Declan's name added in careful print. 40 acres, June said, spreading a survey map across her desk. Up in the high country, no utilities, no road access past the first 2 miles. You'll need 4-wheel drive just to get close. She looked at him over her reading glasses. Not many folks want land that remote. Too much work, too much isolation. That's exactly what I want, Declan said. June studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Fair enough. It's yours free and clear. Property taxes are current through the year. After that, you'll get a bill every March. She paused. You planning to live up there for a while? No, well, it's rough country. Beautiful but rough. In that particular tract, she hesitated. What about it? Old stories, probably nothing. But people around here avoid that land, have for years. What kind of stories? June shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable. Just stories. You know how small towns are. Somebody saw something strange 30 years ago, and the rumor never dies. She pushed the deed toward him. Sign here. Declan signed. The deed was his. 40 acres of Wyoming high country, a place to disappear. He bought supplies at the general store. Tent, sleeping bag, camp stove, basic food. The woman at the register, young and chatty, tried to make conversation. You're new. Just passing through, Declan said. Passing through to where there's nothing past Pine Ridge except mountains and federal land. That's the idea. She rang up his purchases, giving him a curious look. Well, welcome to Pine Ridge, or goodbye to Pine Ridge, whichever fits. Declan loaded the supplies into the truck bed. Valco watched from the passenger seat, head tilted. The dog knew something was shifting. They weren't just stopping here. They were staying. The drive north took 40 minutes on paved road, then another 20 on dirt track that deteriorated into little more than tire ruts through sagebrush. The truck bounced and groaned over rocks. Twice, Declan thought they'd gotten stuck, but the old F-150 clawed its way through. The land opened up into a broad valley pine forest, climbing the slopes on 3 sides, a small creek running through the middle. No structures, no signs of human presence except the faint ruts they were following. Declan stopped the truck where the ruts ended. He got out, stood in the silence. The air smelled like pine and cold water, and something wild he couldn't name. The sky stretched overhead, impossibly big, impossibly blue. Valco jumped down, immediately alert. The dog's head swung left, then right, cataloging scents and sounds. Then he went still, staring northeast toward the tree line. What is it? Declan asked. Valco didn't move, just stared, ears forward, body tense. Declan looked but saw nothing except trees and shadows and afternoon light slanting through the branches. He chalked it up to wildlife, deer maybe, or elk. They were probably everywhere out here. He spent the rest of the day setting up camp. The tent went up crooked one corner, sagging no matter how he adjusted the stakes. Valco sat nearby, watching with what Declan swore was judgment in his dark eyes. Yeah, I see it, Declan muttered, hammering another stake. I'm not a Boy Scout. The dog's expression didn't change. That night, Declan sat by a small fire. Valco stretched out beside him. The stars came out in numbers he'd never seen, even overseas. No light pollution, no city glow. Just stars layered on stars, the Milky Way, a river of light overhead. He pulled out his phone, looked at the last photo of Isabella, taken 2 weeks before she died. She was laughing at something he'd said, hair blowing in the wind, eyes bright. He'd give anything to remember what joke he'd told. What had made her laugh like that? I'm here, he said quietly. I made it to Wyoming. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, but I'm here. The fire popped. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Valco's ears twitched, but he didn't lift his head. Declan put the phone away and lay back, staring up at the stars. For the first time in 6 months, the crushing weight on his chest eased slightly. Not much, but enough to breathe a little deeper. He slept badly the way he always did. Dreams fragmented and dark, full of sounds he couldn't place, and voices calling names he didn't recognize. He woke before dawn to find Valco already awake, sitting at the edge of camp, staring northeast into the trees. Val, the dog didn't turn, just kept staring. Declan got up, joints stiff from sleeping on the ground. He walked over, crouched beside Valco. "What's out there, boy?" Valco's tail didn't wag. His ears stayed forward, locked on something Declan couldn't see or hear. The dog's body thrummed with tension. Not fear, not exactly. More like recognition. Like he'd found something he'd been looking for without knowing he was searching. "Come on," Declan said, standing. "Let's get some food in you." He opened a can of dog food, dumped it into Valco's collapsible bowl. The dog glanced at it, then back toward the trees. He didn't eat. Valco always ate. The dog was a machine when it came to food, predictable as sunrise. Except now. "Val," Declan said, more concerned now. "Eat." Valco sat down, eyes still fixed northeast. He didn't touch the food. That was day one, man. Day two, Valco still wouldn't eat. He drank water, but barely. And he kept returning to the same spot at the edge of camp, staring into the forest with unnerving focus. Declan tried everything. Different food, moving the bowl, offering treats by hand. Nothing worked. The dog was fixated. "You're starting to worry me," Declan said on the morning of day three. "There's nothing out there, it's just trees." But Valco knew something Declan didn't. On the afternoon of day three, Declan gave in. "All right, show me. Whatever it is you keep looking at, show me." Valco stood immediately, tail lifting slowly. "Finally." The word was written in every line of the dog's body. "Finally, you're listening." The dog set off northeast, moving with purpose through the pine forest. Not running, not rushed, just steady, determined forward motion. Declan followed, carrying his Glock out of habit, though he didn't expect trouble. Just wildlife. Maybe a den of some predator Valco wanted to investigate. They walked for half a mile. The forest grew denser, older trees with thick trunks and branches that blocked out most of the sky. The temperature dropped in the shade. Everything smelled damp and green and ancient. Valco stopped. Declan almost walked into him. The dog stood completely still, head lowered slightly, ears forward, waiting. "What?" Declan looked around, saw nothing but trees and undergrowth and... Wait, there, through the branches. Something that didn't belong. A shape too regular, too geometric to be natural. Dark metal. Declan pushed through the undergrowth. Branches caught at his jacket, scratched his hands. He didn't care, because what he was seeing didn't make sense. A train, 4 cars, diesel locomotive in front, 3 cargo cars behind it. Old, covered in moss and rust, and 30 years of forest growth. Sitting in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by pine trees with no tracks anywhere nearby. Declan stopped staring. His mind tried to process it. Failed. Tried again. A train, in the middle of a forest. Miles from any railroad. Like someone had picked it up and set it down here as a joke, then walked away and forgot about it. Valco sat at the edge of the clearing, 10 feet from the locomotive. He didn't go closer, just sat watching, waiting for Declan to understand. "What the hell?" Declan breathed. He approached slowly, boots crunching on pine needles and old leaves. The locomotive was ancient, probably from the 80s or early 90s. Faded paint, broken windows, but the structure was intact. No major damage, just age and neglect. He circled it, looking for markings, found them on the second cargo car. Stenciled letters half hidden under moss. U.S. Geological Survey, 1994, 32 years old. Left here for 32 years. The doors were rusted shut on the first cargo car. Declan pulled out his multi-tool, wedged it into the gap, and pried. Metal screamed. The door shifted an inch, then another. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of old paper and machine oil, and something chemical he couldn't identify. Inside darkness. Declan pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through shadows, revealing metal shelves and boxes. Lots of boxes. Sealed containers, stacked from floor to ceiling. And in the back corner, something still glowing. A faint red light pulsing slowly. Declan climbed inside Valco, staying at the entrance, unwilling to follow. The dog whined softly. A warning. The glowing light came from old monitoring equipment, a metal console with a CRT screen, somehow still powered after 3 decades. The screen showed green text on black background. Containment breach detected, radiation levels. Critical date, August 17th, 1994. Evacuate immediately. The date blinked, over and over. August 17th, 1994. 32 years ago. And the equipment was still running, still warning, still screaming into the emptiness that no one was listening. Declan's hand hovered over the screen. His heart hammered against his ribs. Radiation, containment breach, evacuate. He looked at the boxes stacked everywhere. They weren't just storage, they were evidence. Someone had loaded this train with documentation, with proof of something, and then hidden it here where no one would ever find it, except Isabella's grandfather had found it, or known about it, and left the land to his granddaughter, and she'd left it to Declan. He heard Valco bark, sharp, urgent, the warning bark. Declan turned, climbed back to the door. Valco stood rigid, staring not at the train but back toward camp. His hackles were raised. What now? Then he heard it too. An engine. Distant but growing closer, coming up the dirt road toward his camp. Someone was coming, and Declan had a feeling they weren't here to welcome him to the neighborhood. Morning came to Cedar Ridge the way it always did, slow, cold, and honest. The sun climbed over the mountains with reluctance, casting long shadows across Main Street. Frost clung to the windows of the shops, turning glass into fractured mirrors. The air smelled of wood smoke and coffee, of a town waking up to another day it had seen 1,000 times before. Garrett Wolfe sat in his truck outside the Cedar Ridge Public Library, hands wrapped around a thermos of black coffee, eyes on the building's front door. He hadn't slept. After leaving the train, he'd spent the rest of the night at the cabin, spread out on the floor with Thomas Brennan's letter, the photographs, the falsified reports. He'd read every word 3 times, memorized the names, studied the dates. 1996, 29 years ago, the year Thomas Brennan died, the year the truth got buried. Iron sat in the passenger seat, still and watchful. His breathing was slow, controlled. His eyes tracked every movement on the street, a man unlocking the hardware store, a woman sweeping the steps of the post office, a pickup truck rolling past with a dog in the bed. Assessing, always assessing. At 9 o'clock, the library lights flickered on. Garrett drained the last of his coffee, screwed the cap back on the thermos, and climbed out of the truck. Iron followed without command. The library was small, housed in what had once been a schoolhouse. Red brick, white trim, a bronze plaque beside the door that read Cedar Ridge Public Library, Easterntown, 1952. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and dust that had settled into the corners and given up trying to leave. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with books that looked like they'd been there since the building opened. A few tables sat in the center of the room, wooden and scarred with decades of use. In the back corner, a desk. Behind it, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked up when Garrett entered. Her eyes went to Iron first, then to Garrett. She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either, just watched. Morning, Garrett said. Morning. Her voice was dry, efficient. Help you find something. Old newspapers, 1996. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Specific date, June through August? She studied him for a moment, then stood. Microfiche is in the back. You know how to use a reader. I'll figure it out. She led him to a small room with a single machine, ancient, clunky, the kind of technology that belonged in a museum. She pulled open a drawer and retrieved a box labeled Cedar Ridge Gazette, 1996. Here, she set it on the table. Let me know if you need help. Appreciate it. She left and Garrett sat down. Iron settled beside the chair, eyes on the door, ears rotating toward every sound in the building. Garrett loaded the microfiche and began scrolling. The Cedar Ridge Gazette was a weekly paper 4 pages long, filled with town council minutes, school sports scores, obituaries, and advertisements for farm equipment. The kind of paper where everybody knew everybody, and news meant someone's cow got loose, or the high school basketball team made regionals. Garrett scrolled through June. Nothing. July. Nothing. Then in the second week of August, he found it. Black Pine Lumber Mill closes, economic downturn cited. The article was short, bland, corporate. After 43 years of operation, Black Pine Lumber Mill announced its closure effective August 10, 1996. Mill owner Richard Thornton cited declining timber prices and increased operational costs as the primary factors. The closure will result in the loss of approximately 70 jobs. This was a difficult decision, Thornton said in a statement, but the economic realities of the industry left us no choice. The mill's property will be sold to private investors. Garrett read it twice. No mention of contamination, no mention of environmental concerns, no mention of soil tests or water safety or sick workers. Nothing. He scrolled forward. 2 weeks later, buried on page 3, he found a second article. Local man dies in hiking accident. Thomas Brennan, 37, of Cedar Ridge, died Saturday in a fall near Black Pine Trail. Brennan, a retired Navy SEAL and environmental consultant, was discovered by hikers Sunday morning at the base of Widow's Drop, a popular but treacherous overlook. Sheriff's deputies ruled the death accidental, citing poor weather conditions and difficult terrain. Brennan is survived by his wife, Kate. A memorial service will be held Thursday at Cedar Ridge Community Church. Garrett's jaw tightened. Environmental consultant, Widow's Drop, accidental. He scrolled back to the closure article and read the name again. Richard Thornton. He pulled out his phone and typed the name into a search engine. The results came back fast. Richard Thornton, obituary, 2003. Richard Allen Thornton, 64, passed away March 12, 2003 at Cedar Ridge Medical Center following a heart attack. Thornton was the owner of Black Pine Lumber Mill and a prominent figure in Cedar Ridge business and civic life. He is survived by his son, Victor Thornton, and his mother, Ruth Thornton. Services were held at Cedar Ridge Community Church. Garrett stared at the screen. Victor Thornton, the son. He opened a new search. Victor Thornton, Cedar Ridge, Montana. The first result was a business page. Thornton Development Year LLC, founded 1997, specializing in land acquisition, commercial development, and environmental remediation. Garrett's stomach turned. Environmental remediation. The company that cleaned up contamination was owned by the son of the man who caused it. He took a screenshot, closed the browser, and sat back in the chair. Iron's ears flicked toward him. Garrett looked down. Yeah, I see it too. He ejected the microfiche, returned it to the drawer, and walked out of the library without a word. Outside, the sunlight felt too bright, the air too clean. He climbed into the truck, started the engine, and sat there for a long moment, hands on the wheel, mind turning over the pieces. Thomas Brennan had found proof of contamination. He'd confronted Richard Thornton. 3 days later, he was dead. And the mill closed, the land sold, and the son started a company that made money cleaning up his father's mess. Neat, clean, convenient. Garrett's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He answered. Yeah, a woman's voice. Calm, professional. Mr. Wolf. Who's asking? My name is Morgan Sullivan. I'm a ranger with the Montana Department of Natural Resources. I saw your truck at the library. I'd like to talk. Garrett's eyes narrowed. About what? About why you're asking questions about Black Pine Mill. Silence. Then Brennan's Diner. 30 minutes. The line went dead. Garrett set the phone down and looked at Iron. Looks like we made some noise, he said quietly. Iron's tail didn't move. Garrett put the truck in gear and drove. Act 2, the mayor's warning. Morgan Sullivan was already sitting in a booth when Garrett arrived. She was in her late 30s, tall and lean, with reddish-brown hair pulled back in a low ponytail. Her face was angular, sharp in a way that suggested both intelligence and stubbornness. Freckles dusted her cheeks and the bridge of her nose. She wore a ranger's uniform, dark green, clean-pressed, and a jacket hung on the seat beside her. Her eyes were hazel, alert. She watched Garrett walk in the way a hunter watches movement in the trees. Garrett slid into the booth across from her. Iron sat at his feet, silent and still. Morgan glanced down at the dog, then back at Garrett. Military was. Both of you, both of us. She nodded slowly. I looked you up. Garrett Wolf, retired lieutenant, decorated, discharged 5 years ago after Operation Sandstorm. Garrett said nothing. Morgan leaned forward slightly. You came to Cedar Ridge 2 days ago. Yesterday you asked about Black Pine Mill. This morning you were in the library reading articles from 1996. She paused. What are you looking for? The truth. About what? Thomas Brennan. Morgan's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Something hard, something old. She sat back. What do you know about him? He trained me 21 years ago. Fort Benning, canine handling. Morgan's eyebrows lifted slightly. You knew him? I thought he moved to Oregon after he retired. He didn't. I know. Garrett's voice was quiet. He came here. He found contamination. He tried to stop it. And someone killed him for it. Morgan stared at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She set it on the table and slid it toward him. Garrett unfolded it. It was a death certificate. Thomas Allen Brennan. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. Accidental fall. Signed by the county medical examiner. Dated August 24th, 1996. Garrett read it twice, then looked up. You don't believe it. No, Morgan said. I don't. Why not? She leaned forward again, her voice dropping. My father worked at Black Pine Mill for 20 years. He was a foreman. Strong, healthy, never smoked, never drank. She paused. He died of lung cancer when he was 52. The doctor said it was environmental exposure. Garrett's jaw tightened. Morgan continued. I've been tracking cancer cases in Cedar Ridge for the last 5 years. There's a cluster. 23 deaths in 15 years. All former mill workers or people who lived near the site. She tapped the table. That's not coincidence. That's contamination. And no one's done anything. I've filed reports. I've requested state investigations. Every time the paperwork disappears. Every time I get told there's no evidence. Her eyes hardened. Someone's burying it. Thornton, Morgan nodded. Victor Thornton. He owns half this town. Land, businesses. The mayor's office answers to him. The sheriff answers to him. She paused. And his company, Thornton Development, gets paid every time the state needs environmental cleanup work. Conflict of interest. That's putting it mildly. Garrett folded the death certificate and handed it back. What do you want from me? I want to know what you found. Garrett studied her. Her face, her posture, the way her hands rested flat on the table, steady and sure. He trusted Iron's judgment, and Iron hadn't growled. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the letter. Morgan read it in silence. When she finished, her hands were shaking. He knew, she whispered. He knew, and they killed him. Yeah. She looked up, eyes wet but fierce. We can use this. We can... The bell above the diner door chimed. Both of them looked up. A man stepped inside. He was in his late 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair combed back neatly. He wore a charcoal suit, tailored and expensive, the kind of suit that didn't belong in a town like Cedar Ridge. His face was handsome in a practiced way, strong jaw, clear eyes, a smile that looked genuine until you saw it too many times. He scanned the room and his eyes landed on Garrett. The smile widened. He walked over. Morgan stiffened. The man stopped beside the booth. Mr. Wolf, I don't believe we've met. Garrett didn't stand. We haven't. Victor Thornton. He extended a hand. Garrett looked at it, didn't take it. Victor lowered his hand, smile never faltering. I heard you were asking questions about our town's history. Word travels fast. Small town. Victor glanced at Morgan. Ranger Sullivan, good to see you. Morgan's voice was ice. Mr. Thornton. Victor turned his attention back to Garrett. Mind if I sit? I do. Victor chuckled. Fair enough. He slid into the booth anyway, across from Morgan beside Garrett. Iron's ears flattened slightly. Victor noticed. He reached out slowly, hand extended toward the dog. Iron turned his head, slow, deliberate, looked directly at Victor, and blinked. Once. Slow, the kind of blink that said, I see exactly what you are. Victor withdrew his hand. Not a fan of strangers, huh? Not a fan of liars, Garrett said quietly. Victor's smile thinned, just slightly. Strong words. True ones. Victor leaned back, folded his hands on the table. Mr. Wolf, I understand you're new here. I understand you're curious, but Cedar Ridge has a history, and not all of it is pleasant. His voice was calm, reasonable. Dragging up the past doesn't help anyone. It just opens old wounds. Or it exposes old crimes. Victor's eyes hardened, just for a second. Then the smile returned. You're a veteran, I respect that. I respect men who've served. He paused. But you're also a guest in this town, and guests should be mindful of the hospitality they're shown. Garrett leaned forward. Is that a threat? It's advice. I don't take advice from men who profit off poisoning people. The diner went quiet. Victor's smile disappeared. He stood slowly, adjusted his jacket, and looked down at Garrett with eyes that had gone cold. You're a long way from home, Mr. Wolf, and you're all alone. He paused. That's a dangerous combination. Garrett met his gaze. I'm not alone. Victor glanced at Iron, then at Morgan. Then he turned and walked out. The bell chimed as the door closed. Morgan exhaled shakily. You just made an enemy. Good, Garrett said. Now I know who to watch. She stared at him. You're not afraid of him. I've been afraid of worse. Morgan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You're either very brave or very stupid. Little of both. She laughed despite herself. Then her expression sobered. He's not going to let this go, Garrett. He'll come after you. Let him. You don't understand. He owns this town, the sheriff, the mayor, the radio on her belt crackled, a voice urgent cutting through the static. All units, we have a missing child. Finn Morrison, age 9, last seen near Black Pine Trail. Repeat missing child near Black Pine Trail. Morgan's face went white. Garrett was already standing. Come on, he said. Iron was at the door before either of them moved. Act 3, The Missing Boy. The search began at the southern trailhead of Black Pine Forest, where Finn Morrison's bicycle lay on its side in the dirt front wheel, still spinning slowly when the first responders arrived. By the time Garrett and Morgan pulled up, the area was chaos. Sheriff's deputies, volunteers, parents, dogs barking, radios crackling, voices overlapping in a tangle of panic and procedure. Sheriff Hank Dalton stood in the center of it, a big man in his late 50s, thick through the chest and gut face, red from stress, and too many years behind a desk. He was barking orders, trying to organize a grid search, trying to keep the volunteers from trampling evidence. Morgan stepped out of her truck, Garrett beside her, iron at his heel. Dalton saw them and waved Morgan over. His eyes flicked to Garrett, then to Iron, and his expression soured. "Who's this?" Dalton demanded. "Garrett Wolf," Morgan said. "He's got a trained K-9. Military." Dalton looked at Iron. "We already have search dogs coming from the county." "They're 40 minutes out," Morgan said. "We don't have 40 minutes. Dalton's jaw worked. "This is a controlled operation. I can't have civilians." "He's not a civilian," Morgan interrupted. "He's a veteran with a working dog. Let him help." Dalton stared at her, then at Garrett, then at Iron. "Fine," he said finally. "But you follow my lead. You find something, you report it. You don't go cowboy. Clear." "Clear," Garrett said. Dalton turned back to the crowd shouting orders. Morgan pulled Garrett aside. "Finn's 9, small for his age, brown curly hair. He was riding his bike near the trail. His mom said he was heading home, but he never showed." "How long?" 2 hours. Garrett looked at the sky. The sun was high, but clouds were moving in from the west, dark and heavy. "We've got maybe 3 hours of good light." "I know." Garrett crouched down beside Iron. He pulled a plastic bag from his jacket, one of Finn's shirts provided by his mother, and held it open. "Iron, scent." Iron lowered his nose into the bag. He inhaled deeply, nostrils flaring, processing. Then he lifted his head, his ears swiveled forward. His body shifted into work mode, spine straight, muscles taut, eyes focused. Garrett stood. "He's got it." Morgan stared. "That fast? Oh, he's good at his job." Garrett had unclipped the leash. "Iron, track." Iron moved, not toward the marked trail where the deputies were organizing their grid search. He moved east, into the brush, toward the tree line, toward Black Pine Forest. Morgan followed. "Garrett, that's..." "I know." Dalton said, "I don't care." They entered the forest. The air changed immediately. Cooler, darker. The sound of the search party faded behind them, swallowed by the trees. Iron moved with precision, nose low, body angled forward. He wasn't running, he was tracking. Reading the scent cone, filtering out distractions, following the thread only he could perceive. Garrett stayed 3 paces behind, eyes scanning, mind sharp. Morgan struggled to keep up. How does he know where to go? Scent particles, wind direction, ground temperature. He's processing 100 variables we can't even see. That's insane. That's training. They followed Iron for 15 minutes deeper into the forest, farther from the trail. Then Iron stopped. Garrett's heart kicked. The dog stood at the edge of a creek, nose twitching, ears back, confused. Garrett crouched beside him. "What is it, boy?" Iron sniffed the ground, the water, the air, then he shook his head. Once, frustrated. Garrett scanned the area. The creek was shallow, moving slow over smooth stones. The banks were muddy, disturbed. And the smell was wrong, chemical, sharp, out of place. Garrett dipped his fingers into the water and sniffed. Bleach. Someone had contaminated the scent trail. Morgan saw his expression. "What?" Someone interfered, deliberately. "Who would?" "Someone who doesn't want the boy found." Morgan's face went pale. Iron circled the creek, nostrils flaring, working through the interference. 20 seconds passed. Iron's body language shifted from confusion to frustration to determination. He lowered his head, forced himself to focus. He ignored the chemical smell, pushed past it, found the thread beneath, and then he moved. Upstream, away from the contamination. Garrett exhaled. "Good boy." They followed. 10 minutes later, the forest opened into a small clearing, and there, sitting on a moss-covered boulder, knees drawn to his chest, was a boy. Finn Morrison. 9 years old, small, curly brown hair matted with leaves, face streaked with dirt and tears. He looked up when he heard them. His eyes widened. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to get lost." Morgan rushed forward, dropping to her knees. "You're okay. You're safe now." Garrett stayed back, giving them space. Iron sat beside him, breathing hard but calm. Garrett rested a hand on the dog's head. "You did good." Iron's tail moved. Once. Morgan checked Finn over. No injuries, just scared and cold. She radioed Dalton, gave their location, and wrapped the boy in her jacket. Garrett scanned the clearing. They were close to the diesel train, maybe a quarter mile, too close to be coincidence. He walked the perimeter, eyes on the ground. Boot prints, fresh, same tread as the ones he'd seen 2 nights ago. Someone had been here, recently. He crouched down, examining the prints, and something caught his eye. A glint of metal in the dirt. He reached down and picked it up. A metal tag, small, military issue. He turned it over, and his blood went cold. G. Wolf, SEAL Team 7, his tag, the one he'd lost in Iraq 7 years ago, the one that should have been buried in the sand on the other side of the world. Garrett's hands shook. Someone had brought it here. Someone had left it for him to find. Someone wanted him to know. He looked at Finn, who was still sitting on the boulder, wrapped in Morgan's jacket, staring at the trees. "Finn," Garrett said gently, "did you see anyone out here?" Finn nodded slowly. "A man." Morgan looked up sharply. "What man?" "I don't know. He was far away. He waved at me, like he wanted me to follow." Garrett's jaw tightened. "What did he look like?" "I couldn't see his face. He was wearing a hat. And he had a dog." Garrett's heart stopped. "What kind of dog?" Finn's voice was small. "Like yours." Iron's ears flicked forward. Garrett stood slowly, scanning the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped. And then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of footsteps. Running away. Garrett's hand moved to his belt, instinctively reaching for a sidearm that wasn't there anymore. Iron growled, low, controlled. Morgan stood, pulling Finn close. "What is it?" "We're not alone," Garrett said quietly. And deep in the forest, just beyond the line of sight, something moved. Watching, waiting, and then it was gone. The boy was safe. That was what mattered. That was what Garrett told himself as he stood on the porch of his cabin 3 hours later, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. Finn Morrison had been reunited with his parents, wrapped in blankets and checked by paramedics, scared but unharmed. The search party had dispersed. The radios had gone quiet. The forest had returned to its ancient, patient silence, and Garrett Wolf was packing to leave. Inside the cabin, his duffel bag lay open on the bed. He moved through the small space with mechanical efficiency, folding clothes, checking supplies, his hands performing tasks his mind had stopped questioning years ago. Leave before you get attached. Leave before it gets complicated. Leave before someone else dies because you stayed. Iron sat near the door, watching him. The dog hadn't moved in 20 minutes. He sat upright, spine straight, ears forward, eyes tracking Garrett's every movement with an intensity that felt like judgment. Garrett zipped the duffel closed and carried it to the door. "Come on," he said quietly. "We're done here." Iron didn't move. Garrett stopped. "Iron." The dog's eyes shifted to the window, to the forest beyond, then back to Garrett. "Iron," Garrett said again, his voice harder now. "Let's go." Iron remained motionless. Garrett set the duffel down. His jaw tightened. "We found the boy. We did what we came to do. This isn't our fight." Iron's gaze didn't waver. Garrett felt something crack inside his chest, something old and carefully maintained. "I can't do this again," he said, and his voice broke just slightly. "I can't stay and watch people die because I thought I could help. I can't." He stopped. Iron stood, not toward the door, toward Garrett. The dog crossed the small cabin in 3 strides and sat directly in front of him, close enough that Garrett could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough to see the silver beginning to thread through the dark fur around his muzzle. Iron looked up at him, and Garrett saw it. Not accusation, not command, trust. The kind of trust that said, "I followed you into fire, into bullets, into hell, and I'd do it again, but not away from this. Not this time." Garrett's hands unclenched. He crouched down slowly until he was eye level with the dog. "He was my instructor," Garrett said quietly. "Tom Brennan. He taught me everything. How to read you, how to trust you." His voice roughened. "And they killed him. They buried him and his truth in 29 years of poison, and they're still doing it." Iron's ears tilted forward. Garrett looked toward the window, toward the forest where the diesel train sat waiting in the dark. "If I stay," he said, "people might get hurt. Victor Thornton isn't going to just walk away. He's going to fight. And fighting gets messy." Iron leaned forward, pressed his forehead against Garrett's chest. Steady, solid, unwavering. Garrett closed his eyes. He thought of Thomas Brennan alone in this town trying to stop something bigger than himself. He thought of the letter, "Trust the dog, always trust the dog." He thought of Jenkins, 22 years old, stepping forward into the blast because Garrett had hesitated 1 second too long. He thought of all the times he'd run, all the times he'd told himself it was survival, when maybe it was just fear. Garrett opened his eyes. He rested his hand on Iron's head, fingers sinking into the thick fur. Okay, he whispered. Okay, we stay. Iron's tail moved. Once. Agreement. Garrett stood. He picked up the duffel bag, carried it back to the bed, and unpacked it. Every piece of clothing, every supply, putting them back where they belonged. Outside, the wind picked up. The pines whispered. And somewhere deep in Black Pine Forest, smoke began to rise. Act 2 Wildfire Climax. The call came at 6:30 in the evening. Garrett was heating water for coffee on the wood stove when Iron's head snapped up, ears swiveling toward the window. 3 seconds later, the radio Morgan had given him crackled to life. All units wildfire reported east of Black Pine Trail. Wind pushing southeast. Evacuation advisories in effect. Repeat wildfire reported. Garrett was out the door before the transmission finished. The sky to the east glowed orange. Not the soft orange of sunset. The angry, consuming orange of fire that had found fuel and purpose. Smoke billowed above the tree line, thick and black, rolling toward the town like a living thing. Iron stood beside him, nose lifted, reading the wind. Garrett's phone buzzed, Morgan's voice urgent, cutting through the static of a bad connection. Garrett, Fire East Ridge, teens missing, near the old mill road, can't reach them. The line broke up. Garrett didn't need to hear more. He grabbed his jacket, clipped a flashlight to his belt, and looked at Iron. You ready? Iron was already moving toward the truck. They drove. The road toward Black Pine Trail was chaos. Trucks fleeing the area, headlights cutting through smoke, radios screaming overlapping orders. Garrett drove against the flow toward the fire jaw, set hands steady on the wheel. Iron sat beside him, perfectly still, eyes fixed ahead. At the old mill access road, Garrett saw Morgan's truck parked sideways across the entrance, lights flashing. She was standing beside it, face streaked, with ash radio in hand. Garrett pulled up and got out. How many? He asked. 3, maybe 4. Morgan's voice was hoarse. They went hiking this afternoon, didn't come back. Parents said they were headed toward the old mill buildings. How close is the fire? Close, maybe 30 minutes before it reaches the structures. And the sheriff, he ordered everyone to stay out. Says it's too dangerous. Morgan's eyes hardened. He's not wrong. But those kids are still in there, Garrett finished. Morgan nodded. Garrett looked toward the smoke. The heat was already palpable, even at this distance. The air tasted like ash and burning resin. Iron can track them, Garrett said, if they left a trail. Garrett, the fire. I know. She stared at him. You're going in anyway. Yes. You could die. I could, might as well. He looked at Iron, but he won't let me. Morgan's expression cracked, just for a second. Then she handed him her radio. Channel 6, I'll monitor from here. Garrett clipped it to his belt. Garrett, Morgan said it quietly, don't be a hero. I'm not, he said. I'm just trying not to be a coward anymore. He walked toward the smoke. Iron followed. The forest was burning, not everywhere, not yet. But the fire was moving fast, pushed by wind that seemed to shift direction every few minutes, feeding the flames, spreading them in unpredictable patterns. Garrett moved through the smoke, with his jacket pulled up over his nose and mouth, eyes streaming, lungs burning. The heat pressed against him like a physical force, and the roar of the fire was deafening, crackling, snapping, screaming. Iron moved ahead, nose low, working through the chaos. Dogs didn't track by sight, they tracked by scent. And even through smoke, even through heat, Iron could find the thread. He led Garrett east, away from the worst of the flames, toward the old mill structures that sat half-collapsed and forgotten at the edge of the contamination zone. The buildings loomed out of the smoke like ghosts, wooden skeletons, roofs caved in, walls leaning at angles that defied gravity. And inside one of them, Garrett heard voices, shouting, panicked. He ran. The mill's main storage building was a massive shell, 3 stories tall, walls made of rotting timber and rusted metal. The roof had partially collapsed years ago, and fire was already licking at the western wall, climbing toward the upper floors. Garrett burst through the door. Inside, the air was thick with smoke. He pulled out his flashlight, sweeping the beam across the space. 3 teenagers huddled in the far corner. 2 boys, 1 girl. 15, maybe 16. Faces, pale eyes wide, coughing. The girl saw him first. Help! We can't, the door's blocked. Garrett scanned the room. The main exit was buried under debris from the collapsed roof. The windows were too high to reach, and the fire was spreading fast, consuming the dry wood like paper. Come on, Garrett shouted. This way! He led them toward a side door, smaller, partially hidden behind a stack of old pallets. Iron was already there, nosing at the door, testing it. Garrett kicked it open. Fresh air rushed in, and the fire roared in response, feeding on the oxygen. Go now. When the teenagers stumbled out into the smoke, Garrett pushed them forward toward clearer air toward safety. He was about to follow when he heard it. A crack, loud, sharp, final. He looked up. The ceiling beam directly above him was splitting. Garrett's mind went white. He couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't iron hit him from the side. 80 pounds of muscle and momentum slamming into Garrett's ribs, driving him sideways. They tumbled together across the floor. The beam fell. Massive, heavy, ancient wood turned to weapon by gravity. It crashed down exactly where Garrett had been standing and caught Iron's left shoulder. The dog yelped. Once. Sharp. Involuntary. Then silence. Iron lay pinned beneath the beam, breathing hard, eyes wide, but he didn't thrash. Didn't panic. Discipline? Even now, Garrett scrambled to his feet, heart hammering. No, 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 no! He grabbed the beam with both hands and pulled. It didn't move. Too heavy. Too much weight. Garrett's vision blurred. His hands slipped on the charred wood. Come on! He screamed at himself. At the beam, he planted his feet, bent his knees, and pulled again. This time it shifted, just an inch. But an inch was enough. Iron dragged himself out from under the beam leg, bleeding but moving. Alive. Garrett dropped the beam and fell to his knees beside the dog. I'm not losing you, he gasped. I'm not losing you again. Iron's eyes found his, steady, calm, trusting. Garrett scooped the dog into his arms, all 80 pounds of him, and ran. The building was collapsing behind them, the fire consuming it, the heat chasing them like a living predator. Garrett burst through the door into the open air, lungs screaming, vision swimming, Iron clutched against his chest. Morgan was there, and firefighters and paramedics, and hands reaching for him, voices shouting. He laid Iron down gently on the ground. A paramedic knelt beside the dog, immediately checking vitals, examining the wound. Garrett couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but watch. The paramedic looked up. He's stable. Shoulders injured, but not broken. He'll need stitches and rest, but he's going to be okay. Garrett's knees gave out. He sat down hard on the ground, hands shaking, chest heaving. Iron lifted his head and looked at him. And Garrett laughed, a raw, broken sound that might have been a sob. You stupid, brave dog, he whispered. Iron's tail thumped once against the ground. Morgan crouched beside him, face streaked with tears and ash. The kids are safe, all of them. Garrett nodded, unable to speak. She rested a hand on his shoulder. You saved them. No, Garrett said quietly. He did. He looked at Iron, who was being carefully loaded onto a stretcher by the vet tech who'd arrived with the fire crew. And Garrett made a silent promise. Whatever came next, whatever Victor Thornton threw at him, whatever price he had to pay, he would see this through. For Thomas Brennan, for the 23 people who died in silence, for Iron, who had saved his life more times than he could count, he would stay. Act 3, The Buried Truth. 2 days later, Garrett sat in Morgan's ranger station, Iron lying on a dog bed beside him, left shoulder wrapped in clean white bandages. The vet had said the same thing. The paramedic had no break. No permanent damage, just bruising and a deep laceration that needed time to heal. Iron had taken the stitches without complaint, endured the antibiotics without fuss, and was now recovering with the stoic patience of a soldier on medical leave. He looked, Garrett thought, vaguely annoyed by the whole situation. Morgan sat across from him, laptop open, files spread across the desk. And sitting beside her, looking pale but determined, was Deputy Claire Thornton. Claire was 33, with straight black hair pulled into a tight braid and green eyes that carried the weight of too many secrets. She wore civilian clothes, jeans, a gray sweater, and her badge sat on the desk between them like evidence. She'd turned it in that morning. I can't wear it anymore, she'd told Sheriff Dalton. Not while my father is covering up murder. Dalton had tried to talk her out of it. Tried to convince her she was throwing away her career over conspiracy theories and old grudges. She'd walked out without another word. Now she sat in Morgan's office, hands folded on the table, and spoke in a voice that didn't shake. My grandmother Ruth died last year, Claire said. Before she passed, she gave me an envelope. Told me to open it only if someone started asking about Thomas Brennan. She looked at Garrett. You're the first person who has. She slid the envelope across the table. Inside were photographs. Black and white, grainy, taken from a distance. They showed 2 men standing outside the Black Pine Mill office. One was older, heavy-set in work clothes. The other was younger, wearing a suit. Richard Thornton and his son Victor. And across from them, standing with his arms crossed, was Thomas Brennan. The date stamp read June 15th, 1996, the night before Thomas died. Claire pulled out a second photograph. This one showed Thomas walking away from the meeting, shoulders tense, fists clenched. And in the background, barely visible, Victor Thornton watching him leave. My grandmother took these, Claire said quietly. She was having dinner at the restaurant across the street. She saw them arguing, saw Tom storm out, saw my father and grandfather go back inside. Her voice dropped. She said she heard them through the window. Heard my grandfather say, he's going to destroy us. Heard my father say, then we stop him. Morgan's hands clenched on the desk. Did she tell anyone? She told the sheriff. Back then, that was William Cross. He told her to mind her business. Claire's eyes hardened. Cross retired 3 months later with a full pension, bought a house in Florida. She paused. My father paid for it. Garrett felt something cold settle in his stomach. She knew. She knew, Claire confirmed, and she stayed silent because she was scared. Because she didn't think anyone would believe her. Because, her voice broke, because she was my grandmother and she chose family over truth. She pulled out one more piece of paper, a handwritten note, the ink shaky, the words barely legible. I'm sorry, I should have spoken. I should have been brave. If someone finds this, if someone asks, tell them Victor Thornton killed Thomas Brennan, and I helped him hide it by saying nothing. Forgive me. Ruth Thornton, the room was silent. Morgan broke it first. This is enough. We can take this to the state attorney. We can't, Garrett said quietly. Both women looked at him. This is hearsay, Garrett continued. Ruth's testimony would have mattered if she were alive, but she's not. And photographs of an argument aren't proof of murder. The death certificate says accident. The sheriff at the time ruled it accident. Without a body, without forensic evidence, without witnesses willing to testify. He shook his head. Thornton's lawyers will bury this in 6 hours. Claire's face crumpled. So we do nothing. No, Garrett said. We do it smarter. He pulled out his phone and opened the photos he'd taken inside the diesel train, the falsified reports, the soil tests, the contamination maps. Thornton can fight murder accusations, Garrett said, but he can't fight federal environmental violations, especially not when his company profits from the cleanup. Morgan's eyes widened. Conflict of interest, fraud, falsifying government documents. And 23 wrongful deaths, Garrett added. We don't go after him for Thomas. We go after him for everyone who died after. Claire leaned forward. Help Doa. Garrett looked at Morgan. You said you filed reports with the state. They disappeared. Every time. Because someone in the state office is on Thornton's payroll. Garrett's jaw tightened. So we don't go through the state. We go federal. EPA, DOJ. We send everything, the reports, the photos, Ruth's letter, the contamination data to someone Thornton can't buy. Morgan was already typing. I know someone, federal prosecutor, clean record. She's been trying to crack down on environmental fraud for years. Send it tonight, Garrett said, encrypted, anonymous. Don't use your name. And then what? Claire asked. Then we wait, Garrett said, and we watch Thornton very carefully, because when the feds come knocking, he's going to know someone talked. Claire looked at her badge on the desk. He'll know it was me. He'll suspect, Garrett corrected, but he won't know. Not unless you tell him. She met his eyes. I'm not afraid of him. You should be, Garrett said quietly. Scared people are careful people, and we need to be very careful. Morgan hit send. The files uploaded into the encrypted server, vanishing into the digital ether traveling toward Washington, D.C., and a prosecutor who didn't owe Victor Thornton anything. Morgan closed the laptop. It's done. Garrett nodded. Irons shifted on his bed, adjusting his bandaged shoulder, and let out a long sigh. Garrett looked down at him. Yeah, I know. Now comes the hard part. Irons' eyes closed. He was tired. They all were. But the truth, Garrett thought, didn't care about tired. It just kept moving forward. Slow, patient, inevitable, like a dog on a scent. Act 4 resolution. 3 weeks later, Cedar Ridge woke to sirens. Federal vehicles rolled down Main Street at dawn, black SUVs with government plates, vans marked EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and a mobile command unit that set up in the parking lot of the closed lumber mill. Agents in windbreakers and badges fanned out across the contamination zone, collecting soil samples, water samples, taking photographs, cordoning off areas with yellow tape. By noon, the news trucks arrived. By evening, Victor Thornton's face was on every screen in Montana. Garrett watched it from the cabin iron resting beside him on the couch shoulder, healing slowly but steadily. The TV showed footage of Victor being escorted from his office. No handcuffs, no perp. Walked just a quiet, humiliating exit flanked by federal agents. The charges scrolled across the bottom of the screen. falsifying environmental reports, fraud, obstruction of justice, 23 counts of wrongful death. The news anchor's voice was clinical, professional. Victor Thornton, IEO of Thornton Development, LLC, and former acting mayor of Cedar Ridge, Montana, has resigned from all public positions effective immediately. Federal investigators say evidence of a decades-long cover-up involving toxic contamination has led to one of the largest environmental fraud cases in state history. Garrett turned the TV off. He sat in silence for a long time, then his phone rang. Morgan's voice. "You watching?" I was. "It's over, Garrett. He's done." Garrett looked out the window at the forest. "Is it?" Morgan paused. "What do you mean, Tom's still dead? The 23 people are still dead. Thornton will hire lawyers, drag this out for years, maybe cut a deal." Garrett's voice was quiet. "The truth came out, but that doesn't bring anyone back." "No," Morgan said softly, "but it stops him from doing it again, and it gives those families answers." "That's not nothing." Garrett closed his eyes. "No, it's not nothing." "There's something else," Morgan said. "The town council voted this morning. They're establishing a memorial for Thomas Brennan and the others, and they're naming it after you." "Don't." "Garrett, I didn't do this for recognition. I did it because Tom asked me to, because Iron wouldn't let me walk away." He paused. "Put Tom's name on it, not mine." Morgan was quiet, then, "Okay." "And Morgan." "Yeah, thank you." She laughed soft and tired. "You're the one who stayed, only because I had a good teacher." He hung up. Iron lifted his head and looked at him. Garrett reached down and scratched behind the dog's ears. "We did it, boy. We kept Tom's promise." Iron's tail thumped against the couch. Once. Approval. A week later, Garrett stood beside Kate Brennan at the memorial unveiling. It was a simple stone placed at the edge of Black Pine Trail near the spot where the diesel train still sat waiting to be removed by the a cleanup crews. The stone read, "In memory of Thomas Brennan and all those who spoke truth when silence was easier, 1959 to 1996. Kate's hands shook as she placed flowers at the base. Garrett stood beside her, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. "He would have liked you," Kate said quietly. Garrett looked at her. "I wish I'd known him better." "You did." Kate smiled, tears on her face. "You listened to him, even 29 years later. That's knowing someone." She turned and walked back toward town. Garrett stayed. Iron sat beside him, shoulder fully healed, now harnessed back in place, ready to work. But there was no work today, just silence and remembering. "I kept your promise, Tom," Garrett said quietly. "I trusted the dog, and he didn't let me down." The wind moved through the pines. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called, and Garrett felt for the first time in 5 years something close to peace. He looked down at Iron. "What do you say, boy? You ready to go home?" Iron stood, but he didn't move toward the truck. He moved toward the trail, deeper into the forest, toward the places still unexplored. Garrett smiled. "Yeah," he said, "I thought so." They walked together into the trees, man and dog, and the forest welcomed them like it had been waiting all along. Because some truths don't end when they're spoken. They just open the door to the next one. And Garrett Wolfe, who had come to Cedar Ridge to hide from his past, had finally learned what Thomas Brennan tried to teach him 21 years ago. You don't run from the truth. You trust the dog, and you follow where he leads. Even if it takes you 29 years to get there. Epilogue. The sun set over Cedar Ridge in gold and crimson, painting the mountains in fire that didn't burn. Kate Brennan stood on the porch of her diner, watching the light fade, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands. Morgan Sullivan sat in her ranger station, filing the last of the reports, closing cases that had been open for too long. Claire Thornton packed her apartment, preparing to move to a town where her last name didn't carry ghosts. And in a federal courthouse in Helena, Victor Thornton signed a plea agreement that would keep him out of prison, but strip him of everything else: his company, his assets, his name. The money went into a fund for cleanup, for health care, for the families. It wasn't justice, but it was something. And in a small cabin at the edge of Black Pine Forest, Garrett Wolfe sat on the porch with Iron at his feet. The dog's head rested on Garrett's boot, eyes half closed, breathing slow and steady. Peaceful. Garrett looked at the forest, at the place where Thomas Brennan had left his final message, at the town that had learned finally that silence wasn't kindness. It was just another word for fear. "Sometimes miracles don't come as thunder or fire from heaven," Garrett said quietly, repeating the words he'd heard once long ago in a chapel he couldn't remember the name of. "Sometimes they come as a warning we almost ignore, as a friend who refuses to leave, as the courage to stay when leaving is easier." Iron's tail moved. Once. Garrett smiled. "Tom knew that," he said. That's why he left the letter for someone who'd listen, someone who'd trust the dog. He looked down at Iron, and you made sure I did. The wind moved through the pines, carrying the scent of smoke and earth and something older, something that had been waiting a long time to breathe free. Garrett stood. Come on, boy, let's go inside. But before he turned, his phone buzzed. Unknown number, he answered. A voice he didn't recognize. Female, professional. Mr. Wolf, my name is Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. I'm calling about a case in northern Idaho, a company called Clearwater Development. We've been investigating them for environmental fraud, but we've hit a wall. Then I saw your name in the Cedar Ridge files. Garrett's jaw tightened. I'm not an investigator. No, but you found the truth when no one else could. And we need someone who knows how to look where others won't. Garrett was quiet. Iron stood up, looked at him, waiting. There's a town, Agent Chen continued. People are getting sick. A whistleblower went missing 2 months ago, and I think someone buried the evidence the same way Thornton did. Garrett looked at the forest, at Iron, at the life he'd just started to build. He could say no. He could hang up. He could stay here in the quiet and let someone else fight. Iron's ears tilted forward. Garrett exhaled. Send me the files, he said. Thank you, Mr. Wolf. He hung up. Iron's tail wagged. Garrett shook his head, almost smiling. You're not going to let me rest, are you? Oh. Iron walked to the truck, sat beside the passenger door. Waiting. Garrett laughed quiet, rough reel. Okay, he said. Okay, one more. He grabbed his jacket, his keys, and opened the truck door. Iron jumped in. Garrett climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. As they pulled away from the cabin, he looked in the rearview mirror, at Cedar Ridge fading into the distance, at the memorial stone that would stand long after he was gone, at the truth that had waited 29 years to be spoken. Thank you, Tom, Garrett said quietly, and he drove toward the next town, the next fight, the next truth that needed a man and a dog brave enough to find it. Because sometimes God doesn't send angels with swords. Sometimes he sends a soldier who's tired of running, and a dog who refuses to let him. And together, they're enough. The end.